Hello, I'm Dr. Nick Caddick, Associate Professor of Political Sociology at Anglia-Ruskin University.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sarah Bulmer, Senior Lecturer in Politics and IR at the University of Exeter.
This video abstract is to introduce our recent paper, Film, Narrative Agency and the Politics of Care in Veteran Britain.
And we thought we would just actually tell you a bit of a story about where this paper come from and the project that it kind of came from as well. So Nick, you really led on this paper. Do you want to tell us a bit about the project and then where the idea for this paper came from?
Sure. So one of the key things that we want to get at in this paper is what happens with care after war and military service. So we kind of looked at the environment that veterans enter into when they leave the military, and we saw it as kind of curiously care depleted. So the idea of depletion and depletion of care and care kind of evacuated environments was one thing that really motivated this paper. So we kind of saw that in general, the transitional environment that veterans enter into when they leave the military is really dominated by a focus on employment, economic productivity, and getting veterans back into employment. And we wondered, okay, well, where's the space for care within that? So that's one thing that motivated the project on which this paper is based. So the paper is based on the Stories in Transition project, which looked at the use of arts, culture, and sport in supporting veterans in their transition to civilian life. We worked with three different military charities that are all using really different, innovative and creative practices to support veterans. In these cases, organizations that were using film and artistic creative practice, another that was using sailing, and another that was using battlefield archaeology to support veterans in their journey, in their return to civilian life. We wanted to know, what are veterans getting out of those programs? How might they be supporting them in their transition to civilian life? And in what ways might these projects help to kind of bring back in a focus on care?
And actually, care was one of the things that really structured the way we thought about the project. Although right at the start, I don't think we were thinking in terms of care, but we knew we wanted to do something that was co-produced in a meaningful way that worked with the communities. And that sort of informed how we comprised the team, the research team that we work with. And we made sure we had a veteran researcher on the team, and also the methods that we wanted to use and how we would work with the different partner organizations. And what emerged from that was that filmmaking was a really good way for us to engage in a careful method, but that also gave veterans the chance to make visible and speak about what mattered to them, which in this case was about what they were getting out of going to these organisations, and also more broadly their experiences of being veterans in Britain today. Nick, do you want to say a bit about narrative agency and how central that was to the project and the paper?
Yeah, so the use of co-produced filmmaking as a methodology was really driven by a desire to try and promote this idea of narrative agency, slippery and problematic as it often is. So narrative agency is essentially the opportunity for individuals and their communities to tell their own stories of their experiences, to kind of foreground their ethical relationships and their commitments. So we wanted to know essentially, how do the veterans in each of the groups that we were working with tell their own stories of transition to civilian life in ways that might counter the kind of traditional representations of veterans as damaged heroes or as victims, the kind of dominant media tropes, if you like, of veterans and transition to civilian life. We wanted to know, okay, well, how do veterans choose to tell that story? And so using co-produced film was a way of doing that, whilst recognizing that it's always going to be limited. It's going to be challenged by the priorities, the agendas of us essentially as the research team, in terms of what representations do we foreground and privilege in the editing process. It's always a kind of negotiated accomplishment. So one thing that we kind of highlight throughout the paper is that whilst we can aim to promote narrative agency, it's never pure, it's never simple or straightforward. There are always challenges and trade-offs to be made.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess the other thing that's worth talking a bit about is how we use care ethics, feminist IPE, and then also this idea of care aesthetics, which tries to bring together all of those things into thinking about the visual and the communicative as a way of doing that. Do you want to talk a bit about that, Nick?
Yeah, sure. So our theoretical framework consisted of narrative theory and narrative agency. We were also really interested in recent scholarship on film and visual politics and the potential power of film to make things visible in politically significant ways. And tying that all together with feminist care ethics and feminist international political economy. So we were interested in care as a value and as a practice, both as in terms of the research practice and in terms of understanding and representing the care relationships that we observed between veterans within the groups that we were working with. And so care aesthetics is a really interesting concept, and it's one that we keep coming back to throughout the paper. Care aesthetics was developed by James Thompson, very much inspired by feminist care ethics. And he describes it as an aesthetics of care is about a set of values realized in a relational process that emphasizes engagements between individuals or groups over time. It is one that might consist of small creative encounters or large-scale exhibitions, but it is always one that notices interhuman relations in both the creation and display of art projects. So Thompson is really interested in this idea of careful art and careful art projects, and that's how we ultimately came to see this. And that was represented for us really kind of encapsulated in a mural that the veterans at one of our partner organizations created. And this was a co-created mural that was put together by veterans and civilians working within this community-based organization. And it sort of forms a visual metaphor throughout one of our three films. And the veterans voiced that over with their own reflections on transition and community. And that kind of anchors the metaphor of care, community, and relationships, and it becomes a kind of visual anchor for care as it emerged throughout the project.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing left to say really is just to sum up why we think this matters for an IR audience. And I guess from my perspective, centering and foregrounding care is a really essential part of feminist work because we need to show those relations that are happening and all that labour that is done that is so often unseen. And I think veterans are a key figure in terms of society's engagement with war and in terms of thinking about the legacies of war. I don't know, Nick, if you've got some other things you want to add about the significance of this for an IR audience.
I think one of the things that we aim to show is how stories and narratives, and particularly in this context, co-produced cinematic stories and narratives can be a really powerful way of staking claims for what matters and staking truth claims as well. So making truth claims and value claims. And that the significance of telling stories outside the parameters of liberal individualism is one thing that film can be really good at, and that is currently underutilized, we think, in terms of using film to write the international. So we see there's plenty of examples of film being used as a tool of critical analysis. Of culture of popular culture, but following some really interesting examples that we discuss in the paper, there may be further opportunities to use film itself as a creative methodology to actually show these things and the evocative power of them in IR.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And then the other thing I think is the way that film as a praxis, as a way of actually working with people and giving them opportunities and different recoveries and different ways to express their experiences and then think again and revise those experiences is also a really valuable part of filmmaking as part of that creative methodology.
Yeah, and that kind of also shows the process of filmmaking as well. It's kind of it leaves room for the unexpected in the development of the process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. that's it, I think. And we hope you enjoy
Hope you enjoy the paper. Thank you.
it.